We were allegedly supposed to revisit the universes of Bayonetta 1 and Bayonetta 2, as the new Eyes of Bayonetta 3 book revealed our adventures with Bayo 1 and 2 variants. I'll be breaking down and critiquing the maps, the OG homunculi, the logo, and of course the plot, therefore it's fair use. Starting off with this insane concept art where we see Noatun's church frozen over in some sort of winter wonderland where even the lake is frozen solid. That Brave Cereza is visiting, or at least the first concept of her is visiting. But it goes to show the potential seasonal changes that this world goes through, or Bayonetta 2's world goes through. But my favorite thought about this is that we get to see the amount of time that has passed since we played it way back then. Oh, by the way, let me know in the comments right now which place in the first two Bayonetta games would you have loved to visit, and let's see if I can guess it right in the end. But you know what? The extremity of this scene, oh my god, this screams to me that after the events of Bayonetta 2, in her timeline, Noatun wasn't fully maintained. And you know what? I think that makes a lot of sense. Well, because we just killed their god. This would have been so cool to revisit, and again, would be such cool world building for this timeline. You can couple this with the map of Noatun, which was also revealed in the recent marketing video, but it looks like we do play as Bayo 2 Bayonetta, where we meet Lebolas in this town square, which is quite cool because I've always wanted to fight something here due to the reflective floor. Potentially, we were meant to meet the original main variants around, I believe, halfway through Bayonetta 3 instead of at the very end. Just like in Bayonetta 2, there is the church, and it confirms that Bayo 2 Bayonetta and Brave Cereza were co-oping. As you can see, Brave Cereza already ahead in the church. There's this megalithic concept of Thule, which looks infinitely more intimidating and something where the gate to the multiverse would somehow hide in. There's lava, two awesome looking cities floating on the rock platforms, different climates for different areas, and a central celestial body in the center instead of a mountain. I think they should have gone with this, as the mountain that's in the actual game itself was already familiar with Fimbulventa, and it felt like a easy reuse. This one would have been spine trembling. Like, the central body is also reminiscent of a moon and a sun, which is super fitting for an Umbran and luminous state. Then imagine Singularity is the one at the top waiting for the three Bayonettas after all their adventures. Oh my god, put a pin in this, we're gonna come back to Thule. By the way, a huge shout out to my new friend Queasy, who was kind enough to share these with me, and they believed in sharing the experience with each and every one of you. You the real MVP. Another familiar scene is that we get to see the Cathedral of Cascades. Much like the Umbran Clock Tower, the cathedral is a living being. I'm putting my bets on it being an angelic being since it's a cathedral, and we do verse some Paradisal residences in Bayonetta 2. But you do see Bayonetta 1 and Bayonetta 2 Bayonetta teaming up with each other to fight this structure. I actually would have loved that angular gameplay where you are versing a massive opponent. I really miss that. But it's also revealed that the walkway has been repaired, unlike in the original Bayonetta 2. So there must have been some sort of restoration after Bayo 2's events, possibly even Loki reversing time to fix it later on, after he disappears, I guess. Looking at these screenshots really helped me appreciate Bayonetta 2, and you'll see eventually Bayonetta 1. There's also a concept of revisiting Vigrid in Bayo 2's actually wait, you can deduce where this is taking place based on the fights that are happening, and also the time of day. My best guess is that this scene would have taken place during our time travel adventure in chapter 14 of Bayonetta 2. So in the whole grand scheme of the timeline, Brave Cereza, Bayo 2 Cereza, and Bayo 1 Cereza somehow travels to this point. I hope that clears things up. If this is the case, they are essentially doing a Back to the Future 2 trope where the protagonist goes back to when they went back for the first time. So maybe doing this might have prevented Rose's death, created another timeline, and there probably would have been two Bayonetta 2 Bayonettas in here. Yeah, I can see why they probably didn't want this to be in the story. This part would have been mind-melting. I'm gonna say that it is in Bayonetta 2's world, where the three eventually team up against the classic Charizard Angels that you fought in Bayonetta 1. A cool, iconic callback to a staple monster in Vigrid. But you have this initial concept of the Bayonetta 3 logo that utilizes the dark purple and the 3 from the 2017 trailer, but it's way more elongated with a less saturated tone. It's pretty cool how you can see the evolution of the 3, where the top streak gradually goes down, making parallel lines in the final rendition. The mother maiden crone symbol is much more stretched out, giving a more intimidating vibe for the whole logo. Here's my rendition of how I think it would have been if they gave us the file. You know what, so far considering the amount of location locations with all 3 Bayonettas, this original storyboard focuses a huge majority, at least what we're seeing right now, a huge majority on the 3 Bayonettas working together. So instead of just one grand fight at the end, we get to see Brave Cereza and the first Bayonetta, the one that we use in the game, converse and bond together as they are both capable of doing so. Like the prolonged bonding between the two, or even all 3 of them, would have sparked a multitude of awesome dialogues, showing the differences in their personalities. Brave Cereza being the most logical, not letting her emotions get in the way, Bayo 1 being the most clueless because everything's so new to her, and Bayo 2 being the most compassionate, since they're all apparently from different yet similar timelines.
So you're telling me our daddy was possessed all this time? Correct. Yet he was the strongest storyteller I've ever faced. Why didn't you just ask Loki to use his trump card at the start, like how I did?
More dialogues like these between their fights during their adventures would have made the final goodbyes more memorable, potentially having Bayonetta 1 Cereza being content and relieved that her actions created a strong and brave Cereza capable of saving the multiverse. And I theorize this original story didn't have Brave Cereza dying at the end like what we were given, but mostly saying goodbye to the original Bayonettas, or maybe even them fusing together. But they went with the darker route. Additionally, there is this awesome concept art of Vigrid, all just covered with moss and dead trees, which is definitely after the events of Bayonetta 1, potentially in Bayonetta 1's universe. You see how much this place wasn't maintained, and I just love the vibe. This is my favorite weather, and since this is Brave Cereza exploring this world, imagine this is where she reminisces about the Bayonetta 1 Bayonetta as she was here as a physical child in this universe. Crazy! I can imagine these cinematics already. A scene like that would have confirmed that she is the young one that we raised in the first game. You know, the more I admire these concept arts, the more I feel like this would have been a much more emotional game. That ending probably would have made me cry even more. But going back to Thule, we see an activated monument of the Crescent and Sunrise statues, where we likely had somewhere to actually explore, which I think would have made Bayonetta 3 much more Bayo-esque. That gives me the vibe of the Tower of Truth. But I feel like this was taken out due to time constraints and was replaced with a easier cinematic. Bruh, oh my god, I would have been fine waiting 2 to 4 years for a game like this. From what we've seen so far, let me know down below if you would have waited 2 to 4 more years. Moving on, there's this intense battle scene of a bird golem made from the earth, as there is an orb on its head which is reminiscent of those golem opponents that we're used to. But we're in this deserted landscape to what looks like a dried out lake, and we are using Bayonetta 2. Moving on to one of my favorite concept arts, it seems like we are meant to visit South America in what I think is the Amazon. And what if there were Umbran witches much taller than Bayonetta in this part of the globe? Oh my god, I would have been simping so hard. But you do see Bayo 1 and Bayo 2 working together against this flying fish looking building, considering the gill wings on its neck, which reminds me of the dragon form of the golems in Bayonetta 1 and Bayo 2. But imagine we got to see an untouched tribe of Amazonian Umbran witches that were forgotten in history, that have been uncontacted from the rest of the world, and we could probably get a weapon there. But I think this is one of the Umbran devices that were made in South America all those centuries ago. Then there's this intense scene against a Photoshop flowery looking homunculi. Shout outs to you, Crazy Girl, Undertale reference. But there is an ooze full of a black ink, and this homunculi looks insanely more angelic and even scarier than the ones in the actual game. This one I feel is much more heavenly and speaks to us as if it's a god, which if they were trying to go for the man-made artificial looking aesthetic, I can see why they changed it. But the surroundings on this looks to be a futuristic area, which could have been where Singularity was waiting, and this is its gate guardian. But if you look here, it does look like it is on that celestial body above Thule, since you do see a planetary body here. So relative to Earth, we are actually upside down in this image. I also believe this was like the first concept before the Kraken fight, with all the black liquids, you know, everywhere. And we are versing Viola right here. We have this awesome looking opponent. Now that I think about it, you know, I take it back. These look man-made, but I like to think that these designs look more like an artificial angel based off Paradiso citizens. Like if Singularity was in love with the design of Paradisal angels, and that's what he based it off on. Like, look how menacing this looks. This really gives me the vibe of Singularity inventing a way for angels to beat Bayonettas across the multiverse. Like a sort of, this is how angels are supposed to be if you want to beat Argh. This design is morbidly epic. You can see its limbs having human features, while its body and wings are being developed by what could be nanotechnology, or my headcanon, it's the cells of his dead daughter. But this being is having its energy pulled from a sort of arc reactor equivalent right over here. But these horns, coupled with with these wings. Oh my gosh, it looks so much like an archangel. It felt like it was developing its 6th wing on its way to becoming a seraphim. You also see a control center here, likely to be for that Argh reactor and the other creation circles creating other homunculi. I'm sorry, since Xenogears' biblically accurate angels coupled with humanity's technological advancements is my favorite type of enemy and plot device. Phileas, if you're watching this reminded me of Deuce. Moving on, the lyrics to We Are As One are in this book. And it's quite a cool coincidence how the last part is essentially to never get disheartened.